have you looked at the podcast art for this podcast?
The podcast art for this podcast?
Have you happened to see it? Because I can pull it up if you haven't.
Pull it up.
Because I designed it in Photoshop. There is some symbolism behind it, but I'm curious to hear what you as a artist thinks about it. Now it's gonna be kind of small. I'm gonna hold it up to the camera. If you can't see it,
I'm gonna get real. It almost looks like a triangle right above the head. Is
it's
that
kind of like a 3D square that's circling the head like a crown. Okay, so taking a look at that briefly, I don't know if you have thoughts. Since I designed it, we've been using it for a while. I'm curious if you would critique me, if you have any thoughts initially. Because I've never been critiqued on anything I've done. Not in that realm.
No. Well, this will be fun. Looking at what the subject matter is, I think it's done well technically. So on the visual, I'm like, lit, awesome. But looking at what could be the messaging behind it, it almost seems like it's using like a human element to it, a human aspect. You have that one half of the face where it's living, and then the other half where it's just the skeletal. It's like the bare bones to it. And that whole thing with the head almost being like knocked off, it's open, it's exposed, and it's like flowing out, kind of gives me the idea of being like mind blown a little bit. So in the sense, it's like, considering that this is a podcast, you're talking about things that deal with actual people, about things that could, in a sense, break the barrier of what we already know or what we already perceive to be. And that's kind of what I get with that sense of like, I guess that crowned square and that smoke flowing past it is like kind of gliding through the glass roof of like ideas. That's kind of what I get from it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool. Okay. Could I get a rating? Maybe like a F, a D, B?
1 through 10.
1 through 10, maybe? I don't know. I'm curious. You don't have to be nice. Just because you're here doesn't mean you have to be nice. This is a genuine critique.
I'd say, I mean, for what it is, I'd say it's about a good 8 out of 10.
Wow. See?
It stands on its own, and I think it's relatable to the, unless you want to tell me what it is. How did you put it together? What were your thoughts?
My thoughts, I don't. So you brought an aspect I really liked. The mind blown. It's actually kind of like smoking. The head that's been the top of the head removed. A big part of it is very similar to what you said. So exploring thoughts, exploring ideas. Obviously focusing on the brain because we talk about interesting things, sometimes uninteresting things. Sometimes it's just smoke and mirrors or whatever. But the difference between the skull and the old man, skull is representing, because we have an undertone in the podcast that's really, we've always been interested in piracy and the symbolism there. And then the old man is something that he actually was really into. He likes to use the word patina, like with old leather or something. And so he's like, why don't we make this podcast branded based on like if we're seeking out to grow our own personal patina. So maybe we don't have it yet, but it's something to move towards. So that's why we chose like an old sailor man to be the other half of the face. And then the square also has a representation, but that's a secret. We can't say that.
I respect that. All right. Wow. Now that you like said that, I'm like, oh, now I can see it.
But you gave it an 8 out of 10, and I love your, what do you call it? Your description of what you believed it to be and what you do believe it to be, and your interpretation of it. So I think it's great. Thank you for doing that.
No problem. Art is subjective.
That's great.